Happy Mother's Day. We want to start off by everybody give your mom, whether she's here or not, give your mama a round of applause. And we just want you to know that we love you. Sometimes children are not very good at expressing all of that stuff, especially we boys, I think the daughters are maybe a little bit better at emotionally connecting that way and expressing thanks and that kind of stuff. But we want to let all of our moms know that we love you very dearly, and we're very grateful for the role that you play in our lives. Sometimes we don't communicate it very well. It's like this mom who had her two children ordered her to stay in bed for Mother's Day, right? And she's laying there in bed, and she can smell the bacon frying in the kitchen, right? And so she's laying there, and she's looking forward to what? She's looking forward to breakfast being brought to her in bed, and as time went on, nothing happened. No one came up into the room to try to bring her bacon and eggs and orange juice, the things in her mind that she was, imagining was going to be brought up to her. So she became curious, and she went downstairs, and what did she find? Her two kids sitting at the table with this large breakfast in front of each of them, and they said, "Mom, surprise! For Mother's Day, we gave you a break, and we cooked our own breakfast." Moms, we love you. We're sorry sometimes we don't communicate it very well, but we do love you very dearly. There's a poem that goes like this. They say a man is mighty, he governs land and sea. He wields a mighty scepter o'er lesser powers that be. But a mightier power and stronger man from his throne is hurled. For the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. Blessings on the hand of women. Angels guard its strength and grace in the palace, in the cottage, in the hovel, no matter where the place. Would that ever storms assail it, rainbows ever gently curled, for the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. Women, how divine your mission. Here upon our natal sod, keep the young heart open always to the breath of God. All true trophies of the ages are from mother love impearled, for the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. Blessings on the hand of women. Fathers, sons, and daughters cry, and the sacred songs are mingled with the worship in the sky, mingled where no tempest darkens. Rainbows evermore are hurled, for the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. And there's a lot that's changed, even in my lifetime, even over the last 50 years. We have seen women accomplish some pretty amazing things, right? Like prior to the 60s and 70s, opportunities for women were very limited on what women were allowed to do. But in my lifetime, we've witnessed a lot of change. And I'm going to mention some people. I'm not making any political statements. I'm just saying they accomplished some things, right? Like back in 73. Now, I was too young to really be aware that this happened, but people talked about this forever, right? There was that tennis match between Billie Jean King, and she defeated Bobby Riggs, the #1 tennis player in the entire world. And though I was too young to remember that, man, people were talking about that forever. In 1974, we saw Isabel Martinez de Perón become the president of Argentina. In 1976, Barbara Walters became the first female nightly news anchor. In 1980, Sandra Day O'Connor became the first female Supreme Court justice. In 1993, Sally Ann Ride became the first woman in space. In 87, Aretha Franklin became the first woman inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 83, Janet Reno became the first female Attorney General. In 97, Madeleine Albright becomes the first female Secretary of State, and we currently have the first woman Vice President in the history of our country. And there's been a lot more than that, but these are the only the ones that can come. Like I said, I'm not making any political statements. But today when we talk about womanhood, when we talk about motherhood, let's start off with knowing this. Women are capable. Amen? I need a stronger one than that, right? Women are capable. Amen? Women can be strong and accomplish things, whatever they set their sights on. All of that's true. But you know what else is true? There is nothing more noble. There's nothing more virtuous. There's nothing more important than bringing another human being into the world and then what? And then loving that person. There's nothing greater than that. To protect that person, to nurture that person, to sacrifice on behalf of that person, to make sure that person is equipped to face the world and have a positive impact, right? So we talk about wanting to have an impact on the world, and we can look at all these cases where women have achieved over the last 50 years, right? But let's realize we can make strides in our careers. Yeah, you can challenge yourself to do something new, but if you want to multiply your impact on the world, what's the best way to do that? The best way to do that is to be an amazing mother, to be an amazing parent, to raise children who share your love for the Lord and then equip those children to be godly people and then set them loose on the world. Equip them to be godly people and then you just set those children loose on the world, right? And that poem that I read, that was originally written back in 1865 by a man named William Ross Wallace, and it was titled, "What Rules the World?" And it was written as a praise of motherhood. And it speaks of the immeasurable influence that mothers have on the course of history. Today, what we're going to do is I want us to look at an example in the Bible of a woman, and you may not even know her name. But you see what her name is, right? We're going to learn who this lady is today. She was born in Egypt, but her people were not Egyptians. Who were her people? Her people were shepherds. Her people were from Canaan. They were known as Hebrews, and that word means they are wanderers. They are nomads. And they came to Egypt to escape a famine, and they stayed there. And the reason they stayed there is because one of her people were high up in the Egyptian government. So they stayed in that land, and over a long period of time, what happens? Things change, don't they? The political environment changes, and the leader of Egypt starts to see her people as a threat. In the beginning of the Old Testament book of Exodus, we read about this new king who comes to power, and he's worried about the Hebrews. He's actually afraid of the Hebrews because they're such a large segment of the population of his country, and he's afraid of them. What is he afraid of? He's afraid that they're going to take over. He's afraid that if war breaks out, that the Hebrews will join the people who are attacking Egypt, and they will take over the land, right? And so what does he try to do? Anybody remember this? He tries to make them slaves, right? He tries to enslave them, but as slaves, what do they continue to do? They keep breeding, don't they? So as slaves, they keep breeding. And then he tries to thin out the population by having all the newborn boys killed. And he first orders the midwives. Those of you who don't know, a midwife is somebody that's there that helps along with the birthing process. And he orders the midwives to kill the babies, but they won't do it. And so then he orders, whenever you find a newborn baby, what must you do with them? You must throw them into the river. You take the newborn baby, you throw it into the Nile. And the Nile was a river that was infested with, anybody know? It was infested with crocodiles. And this is where we meet Jochebed. She and her husband have a boy, and he is a beautiful baby boy. I'm not sure how you feel about newborn babies. I would disagree often with my worship minister that I worked with at my previous church. He said newborn babies look like lizards. I disagree. I think they're all beautiful. Anybody with me? And don't misunderstand, I've held newborns who were bald. I've held newborns who had wild, crazy hair. I've held them when they were jaundiced. I've held them when they were wrinkly. And they're all beautiful. So here's where we meet Jochebed. Exodus chapter 2, verse 1. Now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. In the New Testament, the writer of Hebrews kind of retells this, and here's how he puts it. He says, by faith Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. So here we see Jochebed and her husband making a decision. And what's the decision? Their decision they make is to love and to protect their baby no matter what. No matter what the king said. And yes, this mother and this father, they decide to love their baby, but what may it cost them? And they make this decision that it doesn't matter what the king says, we're not letting our son be harmed. And they knew that if the baby was found, yes, the baby would be thrown in the Nile, but what would happen to them? They most likely were forfeiting their own lives for the sake of their baby boy. And the Midrash, which is this book of Jewish tradition, when they comment on this, they actually say that the Egyptians were sending soldiers from house to house looking for babies. So they knew what would happen. They knew what would happen. Not only would he be thrown in the Nile, they most likely would be killed. And so today when we look at Jochebed's example, parents, moms, we have to be willing. We have to be willing to sacrifice for our children. Anybody already believe that? Anybody else here this morning with me? We have to be willing not to sacrifice our children. There's a difference, right? We got to be willing to sacrifice for our children. And I know there are a lot of us who have complicated relationships with our parents, right? We feel like, some feel like their parents weren't there for them. Some wish things would have been different. We cannot change the past. But for those of us who have kids right now, as we look at them, we have to love them. We have to protect them. And we have to sacrifice for our kids. Even kids who were conceived in situations that were not what we necessarily would have chosen, we still need to stand up for those children. We still need to protect those children because they're vulnerable and they are God's gift to you. and it's your job to stand up against those who would try to harm them. Because a child is the most beautiful thing in the world. And in each one of them is packed all of the potential of humanity. And they need protected. And I know as we read this text, what's the writer setting up? Who are we reading about here? It's Moses, right? Okay. And what's the writer setting up? Moses is the hope for his people, right? This is why it says, and he was no ordinary child. And he was a fine child, right? So the writers are setting this up. But do you know what, parents? Our hope is in our children. None of them are ordinary. And they're all amazing. So Jochebed is going to protect her baby from being fed to crocodiles. Now, when her baby started to get too big to hide, they have to come up with this plan. And here was the plan. But when she could not hide him any longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Now, here's something that most people don't realize about the story, because whenever you see this in movies, they don't do it right. Okay? Jochebed took the basket, by the way, which is the same word used for Noah's Ark, which is interesting. Anyway, she took a basket, she waterproofed it, and then what did she do with the basket? When she put the baby in it, what did she do with the basket? Here's what she did not do. She did not push it out into the current of the Nile and say, good luck, hope everything works out. Right? That's how it shows you in the movies, right? She just, all right, whatever, there you go. Good luck with that. Even when people write about it, like that's the scene that we see in the movies, when people write about it, I know Wikipedia is not always the most accurate thing, but even on the Wikipedia page for Jochebed, here's what it says about her. It says, she placed Moses in a basket and released him in the flow of the river Nile. Wikipedia, no, she didn't. She placed him where? Among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. Why did she do that? See, y'all, this is a setup. I don't know if you get this when you're reading. This is a very intentional, right? We find out that there is a method to her madness. She didn't just see a baby. She placed the baby at a very particular location because she knows what she's doing. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank, and she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw a baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. Then his sister, we have a plant, don't we? Asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? So this entire scene, this entire scenario is Jochebed making sure that her baby is safe. And his sister Miriam, they know where to place the baby. And this works out exactly the way that they planned. Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. What just happened there? Isn't this pretty awesome? Who does she get back? She gets her baby back. And the best we know about Egyptian culture, back then babies were not just nursed for a few months. That's kind of the way we do it in our culture, right? Anybody want to guess how long babies were nursed back then? They were nursed for years. So, it not only helped the immune system, it also put off that child's exposure to foodborne illnesses. So, They nursed the baby for years, anywhere between 3 years and 5 years. So potentially, Moses could have stayed with her for 5 years. So here she is, and she has all of this time with her baby boy. And as a child, you know what he was told about, right? As a child, you know what they talked about when she tucked him in at night, right? You know she told him about Abraham and Sarah. You know she told him about Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob and Rachel and Leah. He knew who his people were. He knew where he came from. She taught him about their God who would one day send these people a deliverer. And so here is another priority, parents. Here's a priority that we should set with our children. They need our nourishment, not just physically, but spiritually. They need the nourishment of their parents. Now, here is the trap that many Christian parents have fallen into for a long time. It's thinking that just making sure your kids go to church is getting the job done. Guess what? It isn't. And don't misunderstand, having your kids in church is very important. But what they hear in church is not going to stick unless those things are modeled for them at home. The things they hear in church will not stick unless mom and dad are modeling those things for those children at home. So when this child was taken then to live in the house of Pharaoh's daughter, we're not told a lot, but it's apparent that he held on to the things that his real mother taught him. In Acts 7:23, it tells us that when Moses was 40 years old, he goes out to see his people, right? So he knows who his people are. He knows who they are. He remembers who he is. And when he sees his people being oppressed, what does he decide to do? He decides to take a stand. He chooses a side. In Hebrews 11:24 and 25, it says, by faith Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God, rather to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. What it tells us about Moses is he makes a choice and he chooses a side. And we see Moses leave Egypt. He leaves because he kills an Egyptian in defense of a Hebrew slave. He starts a new life in the land of Midian. He marries, he becomes a shepherd, and it was when Moses is 80 years old. The baby we read about at the beginning of Exodus is 80 years old. And he is called to play his part in changing the entire world. When he's 80 years old, God calls him. Yahweh, the true God, calls him. He was told those stories when he was a baby about God sending a deliverer. At 80 years old, who does God tell him he is? He is that deliverer. And he delivers his people from Egypt. And God chose him. God chose Jochebed's baby boy. He is the deliverer they've been waiting for. The life that she saved, would go on to save a nation. The life that she saved would go on to deliver millions of people from slavery. The life that she saved helped to create the basis for all of Western culture. And who was he? He was just a baby. And that baby was beautiful. He was fine. He was not an ordinary child. Today, I want to encourage all of us to stand up for those babies. Today, I want to encourage all the moms. Be amazing moms. Talking about having an impact. Talk about multiplying your impact on the world. Love and protect your kids. Sacrifice for your kids. Nurture them not just physically but also spiritually. Help them to know who they are in the Lord. Encourage them, equip them, and then set them loose on the world. We're going to go ahead and sing a song of decision today. If you're here and you want to begin your relationship with the Lord, you're a person who believes, you're willing to change the direction of your life from serving yourself to serving God. You're willing to die to yourself, be joined with Jesus in his death, burial, and resurrection, to raise as a brand new creation, to raise as an ambassador for Jesus to the world. You come forward as we all stand up together and as we sing this song.